The laughter echoed through the bright glass lobby like a weapon, sharp and humiliating, cutting deeper than anyone realized. Men in expensive suits smirked, women exchanged mocking glances, and security guards stood with folded arms as if they were watching entertainment instead of witnessing a man's dignity being torn apart. Standing in the center of it all was a young man wearing worn-out shoes, a faded jacket, and carrying a backpack that looked older than he was. His face remained calm, but his eyes carried years of silent pain. Then, in a voice so steady it silenced the room for just a heartbeat, he said 4 unforgettable words. "You don't know who I am." Before we begin this unforgettable journey, take a moment to like this video, comment below, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales if you believe that every person deserves respect, no matter how they look, where they come from, or what they own. Sometimes the people society ignores carry the greatest stories hidden inside them. Aaron Vale had spent most of his life learning how invisible people felt. At 28 years old, he lived in a modest apartment above an old bookstore in a quiet neighborhood. He rode buses instead of luxury cars, ate simple meals, and wore clothes that looked ordinary enough to blend into any crowd. To strangers, he seemed like another hardworking young man trying to survive in an increasingly difficult world. But appearances had always been misleading. 20 years earlier, Aaron had been born into a family whose name was whispered among financial giants, politicians, and global leaders. The Vale dynasty controlled technologies, energy companies, medical innovations, shipping networks, and investments spread across continents. Their total wealth had reached levels so vast that even economists struggled to calculate it accurately. People called them the trillion-dollar family. Yet Aaron had grown up far away from the spotlight. His grandfather, a man famous for his wisdom, believed wealth had become a curse for their bloodline. He watched relatives become arrogant, entitled, and emotionally empty. He feared Aaron would become another spoiled heir who valued power more than people. So he made an unusual decision. Aaron would live anonymously. He would attend public schools, experience rejection, work ordinary jobs, and understand struggle before inheriting anything. At 12, Aaron stocked shelves in grocery stores. At 16, he washed dishes. At 20, he worked night shifts unloading delivery trucks. At 24, he helped elderly customers carry books at the bookstore downstairs. He learned something money could never buy. He learned compassion. He saw single mothers counting coins at supermarket counters. He saw exhausted fathers working double shifts to feed their families. He saw brilliant students abandoning dreams because they couldn't afford tuition. He saw elderly people choosing medicine over food. And each experience shaped him into someone remarkably different from the people waiting in luxury boardrooms to inherit empires. For years, Aaron never questioned his grandfather's choice. Until the old man passed away. The funeral was private, quiet, and filled with powerful individuals dressed in black. After the ceremony, Aaron received a handwritten letter. Inside were simple words. If you have learned to see people beyond status, then you are finally ready. The world will test you one last time. Alongside the letter was an invitation. The annual gathering of the Vale Global Consortium. Attendance mandatory. Aaron arrived at the towering headquarters in the middle of the city on a bright summer morning. The building rose into the sky like a monument to power itself. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Executives stepped out wearing designer suits. Influencers posed for photographs. Investors discussed billions over coffee. And Aaron stepped from a crowded bus carrying a backpack. People immediately noticed. Some assumed he was a delivery worker. Others thought he had entered by mistake. When he approached the registration desk, the receptionist looked confused. She examined his clothes. Then looked at her computer. Then looked back at him. Her smile disappeared. Several executives standing nearby overheard the exchange. One man laughed openly. Another whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Looks like security forgot to check invitations. A woman wearing expensive jewelry chuckled. Maybe he came for free snacks. The laughter spread. Aaron remained composed. He handed over his invitation. The receptionist glanced at it briefly and frowned. There must be some misunderstanding. She called a supervisor. The supervisor arrived, barely hiding his irritation. He scanned the invitation and shook his head. This is impossible. Someone pulled out a phone. Others began recording. Humiliation had become entertainment. Aaron remembered all the people he had met over the years. The janitors ignored by executives. The cashiers treated as invisible. The delivery workers spoken to with disrespect. For a moment, he understood exactly how they felt. But pain no longer controlled him. His grandfather had prepared him for this. Then Aaron spoke quietly. You don't know who I am. The room erupted again. One investor laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Another person said everyone claimed to be important these days. The supervisor signaled security. 2 guards approached. But before they could escort Aaron out, an elderly woman stepped out of a private elevator. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversations stopped. People straightened their posture. Eyes filled with nervous respect. It was Helena Arkwright, the long-serving chairwoman of the consortium. She had worked beside Aaron's grandfather for over 40 years. She looked directly at Aaron. Tears appeared in her eyes. Then, in front of hundreds of witnesses, she bowed her head. The entire lobby froze. Her voice trembled with emotion. Welcome home, Mr. Vale. Silence. Absolute silence. The phones stopped recording. Smiles vanished. Faces turned pale. Helena took Aaron's hand and guided him toward the private elevator reserved only for the highest-ranking members. The supervisor who mocked him stood motionless. The receptionist lowered her eyes. The investors who laughed could barely breathe. Because everyone finally understood. The man they had ridiculed was not an employee. Not a visitor. Not a stranger. He was the sole heir to a fortune larger than many nations' economies. News spread through the building within minutes. Executives panicked. Some rushed to prepare apologies. Others attempted to justify their behavior. A few simply disappeared. But Aaron wasn't interested in revenge. Not in the way people expected. During the meeting, leaders from around the world gathered around a massive circular table. Screens displayed assets, projects, and financial figures so enormous they seemed unreal. Helena stood beside Aaron. She announced that according to the final wishes of his grandfather, all controlling authority would pass immediately to Aaron Vale. Applause filled the room. Yet Aaron's expression remained serious. He looked at the people surrounding him. Many had spent years building careers around influence and prestige. But he wondered how many still remembered basic humanity. Then he spoke. He said wealth had never impressed him. Titles meant little. Luxury meant even less. Because he had spent years among ordinary people and discovered something extraordinary. People suffering quietly possessed more strength than billionaires boasting loudly. He announced the first decisions of his leadership. The executives responsible for mistreating lower-level employees would be removed. Anonymous employee reviews would become mandatory. Minimum wages throughout their global companies would increase significantly. Scholarship programs would be expanded. Medical assistance funds would be created for struggling families. Housing initiatives would begin immediately. Mental health support would become accessible for every worker. Some investors objected. They argued profits would decline. They worried shareholders would complain. Aaron listened patiently. Then he shared a story. He spoke about a bookstore owner who nearly lost his business because medical bills consumed everything he earned. He spoke about a single mother working 3 jobs. He spoke about a teenager abandoning college dreams. He spoke about elderly people waiting for kindness that rarely arrived. Then he asked a question that pierced every heart inside the room. What is the purpose of wealth if it cannot ease someone's burden? No one answered. For the first time in years, many executives looked ashamed. Over the following months, Heir's decisions transformed countless lives. Employees previously ignored found themselves respected. Families received assistance. Communities gained new schools. Hospitals received funding. Scholarships opened doors for thousands of students. And the world watched with fascination. Media outlets called him the invisible heir. Others called him the billionaire who lived like a common man. People admired his humility. But Heir never forgot the laughter in that lobby. Not because it hurt him, but because it represented a much larger problem. People judged strangers within seconds. They measured worth through clothing, cars, titles, appearances. Yet the greatest treasures often arrived disguised as ordinary souls. One rainy afternoon, Heir returned quietly to the bookstore where he had once worked. Nothing had changed. The shelves still smelled of old paper. The wooden floors creaked softly. The owner smiled warmly upon seeing him. There were no cameras. No headlines. No security teams. Just simple human connection. Heir purchased books for local children and spent hours talking with elderly customers. He felt happier there than inside any luxury mansion. Because despite possessing unimaginable wealth, he still valued the small moments that had shaped him. Years later, people would remember Heir Vale not because he inherited trillions. They remembered him because he proved kindness was more powerful than status. They remembered him because he transformed corporations into communities. They remembered him because he refused to let money define his identity. And perhaps most importantly, they remembered the lesson hidden inside his story. Every person carries unseen battles. Every stranger has a history. Every ordinary face may hold extraordinary dreams. Respect costs nothing. But disrespect can reveal everything about someone's character. Eventually, the very people who laughed at Heir began volunteering in community projects. Some apologized sincerely. Others changed their behavior permanently. His example inspired transformation rather than destruction. Because the hidden trillion-dollar heir did destroy something that day. He destroyed arrogance. He destroyed prejudice. He destroyed the belief that appearance determines value. And in its place, he built something far greater. Compassion. Hope. Dignity. And a reminder that humanity will always be worth more than wealth. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness sees beyond wealth," if you believe every person deserves respect regardless of their appearance. As Heir looked across the city skyline one evening, watching the sun paint the buildings gold, he realized his grandfather's greatest inheritance had never been money. It had been perspective. The ability to see people for who they truly were. The courage to remain humble when the world encouraged pride. The strength to choose kindness when revenge seemed easier. And perhaps that is the richest legacy anyone can leave behind. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you to treat others with kindness, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales for more emotional stories that celebrate compassion, resilience, and the beauty hidden within ordinary lives. Because sometimes, the people the world overlooks are the very ones capable of changing it forever.